All right, it's winding down. I need to turn one.
Here, let me just show you how to on this one.
Where's Paul?
I don't want
him broadcasting noise. It doesn't have a sound on his top bar. I know. All right, grab a seat. Turn this back on now. No feedback happening. Fantastic. And as soon as we have a speaker back. Yes, I think. Shall we improvise tagging the intro?
Yeah, I think so.
Come on up.
That's the string.
There.
Take turns being Glenn.
Hmm?
You take turns being Glenn.
That'll pick us up, so I'll do it. Jam it back in a moment. All right. Thanks everyone for coming to DevSecOps London Gathering. We did one earlier at DTX earlier in the month. It's kind of, we don't normally do that, but they gave us a free venue and a whole bunch of kind of
November, so it's a little way off. So go and have a look. It's a BCS DevSecOps group on the internet, and you can go register there. It's in London and online. It's in London near Moorgate in BCS HQ. And the topic, sorry, I mentioned is the journey from DevOps to DevSecOps. So it's a great topic for an introduction, and if you think you know it all, to come along and find out what you don't know. So please do share that with your friends and colleagues.
Thanks so much, Rory.
But we wouldn't be who we are without sponsors. We've got several key sponsors. Of course, the main one who doesn't know what's still on the slide is In-Group.
The in-group.
The In-Group.
Yeah.
Would David Tree want to come up and tell us what you do? Is he just escaped exactly when he said he would come up here and talk?
I think so.
Should we come back to?
We'll come back to
David?
it, unless you want to come into it.
I'm
Prepared.
Convenient.
Natural.
There
Oh,
we
okay.
go, there he is.
Come. One job, David. Well, let's go back to this way, because you're getting up the generic slide. Tell us a little bit about it.
Hey guys, welcome to our office. Investigo is a recruitment company. So In-Group is a wider group of companies. We have a recruitment business, consulting business, an organization which trains and develops grads and then deploys them onto customer sites. What my team do at Investigo is recruit cybersecurity. You know, the DevSecOps guys for several years now. Always good to partner, to host where we can attend and learn and really just network with the wider security community. If you guys are open to opportunities, looking for a new role, or really just want to capture the status of the market and what's going on, please feel free to reach out to me or one of the team. Generally, Shuri, who's over there at the back, and a few of the others will be coming up later. So we're always happy to talk around hiring or job opportunities as well. Really, it's always good to host. I'm going to pass you over to Paul, who's going to present an interesting talk. I think Paul's next, right?
No.
Back to you.
Slow down. He doesn't. All right, we have other sponsors. Sysdig is a valued sponsor. You probably know Sysdig for some other open source offerings for observability, like Falcon Sysdig, which are fantastic. Some of the original eBPF products out there. Do check them out. They do have a commercial platform, of course. They'd love you to pay for. Prisma Cloud. Wonder if we have anybody from Prisma Cloud out here in the one of you. Come, tell us something about Prisma Cloud.
Hello.
Educate me.
Very much. Okay, so hey guys, Archie Bradshaw. So my role is cloud security specialist at Palo Alto Networks. Quick show of hands, who has heard of Prisma Cloud before? Excellent, good stuff. So we've just released Project Darwin, which is like our latest, most significant release. We'd love to hear from you guys on what you're seeing in the cloud security market. CISOs, cloud security engineers, DevOps architects, whatever the persona. We'll be around after today. Come and have a chat, and we'd love to talk to you about cloud security. So thanks, guys. That's it.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Archie. Amazing. And our final sponsor is a kind of a complicated slide. Leaders in application security posture management. Really quite a new player in the market, very innovative. I would suggest if you've got cloud security on your mind and you're looking for new vendors, all three of these are wonderful options for you to take a look at. All right, how do we become this here?
You already are one. Wasn't that easy? So you are all speakers. You are active in the space. We'd love to hear from you. This is how we spoke before, I think. We initially kind of worked with you, I think, on a live talk. So if you want to be up here, you can. Email us at team@tsolg.com. Scan this QR code. You can click through your form. All we need from you is a brief synopsis of what you want to speak about, a bit of a bio about you, yourself, why you person to speak about this, and what your take is, and we can go from there. Please include your headshot if possible, or you can use your later. But
Including a headshot's option, isn't it?
it is, yeah, but
Just get an email from me afterwards asking. for
Yeah,
one.
yeah. And you mentioned the QR code. So your QR code instantly installs malware that AI generates an amazing subject for you, takes a headshot via your camera, and submits it without you knowing. So not a problem. It all works out for you. Our next meetup, November 15th. I can read that, right? Yeah. It will be held is Sarah Wells, Paving the Road to Effective Software Development, and it'll be held at Veracode. Veracode, are you here? Wave. Yay! A very competent and constant venue sponsor as well.
And on that note as well,
Yeah.
thank you. Just before our next meetup at Veracode, we will be announcing the winner of the competition, which if you head to
Ooh.
get a drink at some point today, you'll see a placard there where you can scan the QR code to enter a competition to win a full pass to Black Hat EU this December. And we'll be announcing the winners online on the 10th of November.
When is Black Hat EU?
6th and 7th of December.
There we go, 6th and 7th of December.
And the cost of the ticket is 1,750. It's a briefing pass, so it gives you access to all the technical workshops. And it's you just need to scan the QR code. There is no test or anything. Just add your email address, and then we'll just spin the wheel. It will be a random allocation of who's gonna win, and we're gonna announce the winner on the 10th.
That's fantastic. You're at $1,700 or pounds, who cares? That's a lot of money to win a free pass to Black Hat EU. So all of you here, there's not many of you, scan the code. For all of you online who didn't come, ha.
There is a link on our social media as well.
Okay, there'll be a link on social media. Join our social media. We're not going to be favorites to people who are here. Wink, wink. All right, I'm going to hand over to our main speaker. Many of you already know him. He's a regular at DevSecOps gathering, and I'll let you introduce yourself. And I'll put this back on the podium. Is that cool?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Steve.
There we go. Bowing down.
So I'm Paul Schwarzenberger. So I'm cloud security engineer and architect. Now, just going to switch over. If I can press the button. Why isn't this working? It's that live link, isn't it? Yeah. What's your live link, Dan? Well, it doesn't matter, doesn't it, really? Oh, there it is. Yeah, it didn't press. Anyway, whatever. So, good to see you all. So this is called Road to IAM Zero. So IAM being Identity and Access Management, and this is specifically about Amazon Web Services or AWS. So how many of you have used AWS? Nearly, well, most, about 2/3. Okay. And IAM in particular, in this context, I'm referring to IAM users, which is Identity and Access Management users. So, I'll be going through what that is, but how many of you have logged into AWS with an IAM user? So, okay, about half. So at least half of you know the concept of what I'm talking about, and the rest of you, I will show you anyway. So, okay. So what I'm going to talk through today, I'm going to start off by just going through what an IAM user actually is for anybody who doesn't know. Again, in the context of AWS. So if you want to talk about Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure, then we can talk about that afterwards, have a chat about it afterwards or any questions. And feel free, by the way, as we go through, just ask any question you want. It's fine. You know, or wait to the end is fine as well. So I'll go through what an IAM user is, why IAM users are a bad thing, and then 5 steps to eliminate IAM users from your AWS organization, because from a security point of view, that will bring you a lot of benefits. So that's the plan. And as we go through, I'll demonstrate most of what I'm talking about. So starting with what an IAM user actually is. So, okay. Right, so I've just logged into an AWS account, so I'm an Amazon Web Services account. Now, for those of you, again, who might not be so familiar with AWS, if you decide, you know, you want to create an AWS account, then what you would do would be you would log on to your Google create AWS account, probably. That's what I would do anyway. And then you would find the right page, hopefully not a fake page. And you know, then you would register for an AWS account, you'd have an email address and you'd provide a credit card. And that email address would then be used, that will then become the root identity of that AWS account. So that's how you'd start off. You'd start off with just one AWS account. This is if you're doing it yourself, not as part of a company. So that's how you start. Now, this root identity is an identity you're not supposed to actually use regularly because it has loads of permissions and privileges. And what you should do is then create, well, what you could do is create individual users, one for yourself and one for other people who want to use that AWS account. So if that was the case, I could go into IAM, Identity and Access Management, and within IAM, I've got some users that I've created within AWS. And what I could then do is I could create a user. So if I create a user, and we'll have this user can be called Rakesh, and I can maybe give Rakesh user access to the console. And you'll see here that AWS is actually now discouraging me from creating IAM users because they also know that it's a bad thing and they try to stop people from doing it. And that's very positive. They've been doing that for the last, over the course of the year, they've put more and more steps in to stop people from doing what I'm just about to do, or discourage people from doing what I'm just about to do. So I'm going to nevertheless say I want to create one anyway, and press next. And I could add the user to a group and maybe give the user, add the user to this group, for example, press next and create a user. So I've now created an IAM user. So here's my IAM user called Rakesh. Now, Rakesh and then Rakesh will get a password that he could use to log in. So we've now created an identity for Rakesh and a password. So Rakesh may also want to do some coding. So he might want to deploy infrastructure as code. So he may want to go to security credentials, and he should assign a multi-factor authentication token. And he could also create an access key. And again, just over the last 6 months or a year, AWS has realized that these access keys are a bad thing because they are long-lived credentials. So they're actually trying to discourage people from creating them, which is great, but it's very positive. But nevertheless, I'm going to do it anyway. But it is in the course of a demo. So I'll press next and create an access key for Rakesh. So here's the access key. So that in itself isn't secret, but this one is secret. And I've now just shown it to the whole world on the on the live stream. So what I better do quickly, because that account did have some privileges, is quickly go in and delete that user so they can't take over, whoever it is can't take over my account, or maybe they've already done so. But I'll better quickly delete that user, put in Rakesh to confirm, and delete the user. So hopefully that was quick enough. Who knows? Anyway, right. So that's how easy it is to create an IAM user, and that's what an IAM user is. So you all sort of with me so far? Hopefully. Okay. So I know some of you may be completely familiar with all of this. So don't worry. Hopefully there'll be stuff that you'll be interested in that you haven't seen before shortly. So but I just want to make sure and bring everybody up to the same level. So IAM users have been the cause of a large number of breaches. Well, IAM users and their associated long-lived credentials. So an IAM user will have a password that is a long-lived credential. You don't have to change the password. And if they've created access keys, then they are also long-lived credentials. They don't expire. You can't even set an expiry date. You can rotate them, but you don't set an expiry date. So all of these organizations have had breaches associated with IAM users and their long-lived credentials. Now, the links for all of the details of all of this are in the notes of this presentation, which you can't see. However, Francesca is going to send, I think, 2 versions of the slides, one which is just a PDF of all the slides and in full view, and the other which is a sort of notes view where you get a small view of the slide and all the links. that are in the presentation.
Paul, quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Can anyone create a user, or do you have to have certain? Do you have to be an administrator?
Yeah, you have to have certain rights, and specifically, you have to have an IAM create user permission. And yes, an admin would have that permission. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, and it would be good not to let too many people have that permission, but most times they do. Go ahead.
Can we customize the key as well?
Customize the key.
Yeah.
You can tag the key, so you can give it a tag so you know what it was for. But the best thing you could do is just not create the key in the first place, as we'll come on to.
I mean, the key seems very big and then so if you can customize the key accordingly or no, right? It's like auto-generated and we have to just use
Yes, it's also the key is auto-generated. You can choose not to create one. So if you only ever log in to the console to look at things as a human being with a browser, then you don't need an access key. The access key is for programmatic access for either human beings that want to deploy infrastructure as code, for example, or for machine type service accounts that need to interact with AWS. So but the key is just generated for you and you don't have any choice. So there's been some analysis done, and again, links actually here, but also in the presentation, that 44% of AWS breaches involve IAM users or their credentials. And that was an assessment which was done by Nick Jones earlier this year, based on various a source of collection of all the whole load of cloud incidents. So that means if we can improve things by getting rid of all the IAM users, that should significantly reduce the risk to an organization. So why are IAM users bad, and also how do they get created? Well, I think you've got some ideas of why they're bad already. So you've seen the access keys, the secret access keys. If these get leaked, for example, accidentally committed to GitHub, as an example, or taken by somebody who's left the organization, then they can be used you have the same privileges as that user when they log into the console. Here's one of the many examples. This is DXC that committed private keys to public GitHub on a Friday afternoon, probably the worst time to do it, and then came back on Monday and realized that $64,000 had been spent on 244 virtual machines. One of the organizations I've worked with, I've seen something very similar, cryptocurrency mining. Actually, from that particular one I'm thinking of was actually a Google Cloud Platform service key, which is the equivalent of access key and secret key. So it isn't just AWS that has this sort of issue. It's not just a security risk, but also a compliance risk. So if you're working at an organization that has regulatory requirements, then you have to meet certain standards. And for example, Center for Internet Security Foundation benchmark is a well-known standard. And all of these standards require that you rotate access keys every 90 days. And if you have lots of IAM users, that's much, much harder to do. So there are compliance aspects as well as the risk increasing. So hopefully you will agree that they're bad. So let's just talk a little bit more about how they get created in practice. So you've seen how I created them, but if you're working at an enterprise and there are these IAM users, how do they get created? Well, if you imagine you've got a small business, a startup maybe, and they started off, the managing director created an AWS account in the way that I described, usually the managing director with their own email address and their credit card. That's usually what happens. And they start off just creating one AWS account. And then they sort of realize, well, actually, it's a good idea to have different AWS accounts for different purposes, different environments. And that's absolutely right, because an AWS account is a very solid sort of permissions boundary, so it's good to split things up in that way. So you have your dev account, and the developers will have IAM users in their dev account. Then there might be a test account, so they might create users identities in that account as well. And then there might be a production account. And this isn't also, and then they may create access keys. And this isn't just for human users, but this is also for machine type users or service accounts. So in AWS, there's no distinction between a human user and a machine user, which is a bit different from some of the other clouds. So if you, for example, want to use Circle CI, which is a cloud continuous integration, continuous deployment platform, then the way that a lot of people set that up is to create an IAM user in each account called Circle CI, create an access key and secret key, and then stick those into the project settings of your Circle CI job. That's what a lot of people do. So some of these IAM users are for machine-based access like that. And those identities normally won't have a password, but they will have the access keys. And others are for human beings. And the human being ones, they're all a problem. So the human being ones are a problem because what happens, and I've seen this in more than one of the organizations that I've worked with, what happens in this situation is a developer leaves the company. And when that developer leaves the company, you've got a nice joiner movers leavers process that removes them from the corporate identity source, which is usually Active Directory. Well, or it could be Active Directory or whatever. But then there's no process to then delete all of the identities in all the different accounts. So several times I've logged into an AWS account and I've seen a user, hold on a minute, she left 2 weeks ago, and quickly delete it. And that person could have left if they were feeling malicious in any way or resentful or whatever. They could cause an awful lot of damage and would no longer have a contractual relationship as an employee. So that's a bad thing. And then if you look at the other example I gave, which is like the Circle CI secret keys, there's nothing to say that when a developer leaves the company, they haven't got copies of all of those keys. I mean, not necessarily maliciously, they might have just saved them to their laptop. But then that laptop could get stolen and a hacker could get them. So there's all sorts of risks with this whole setup. So it's a problem. So does everybody agree that it's a good idea to get rid of them? Good. So here are my 5 steps to IAM 0. So IAM 0 being this nirvana of not having any IAM users in an organization whatsoever. So that's where we're going to go on this journey. So the first step is to measure and monitor. So actually, how big a problem have we got at the organization? And let's get an update every week on how we're doing to reduce them. A quick win is to remove inactive users. So let's remove all the ones that aren't being used. Move all human users to AWS IAM Identity Center, which used to be known as single sign-on. And number 4 is for those machine type access, like the Circle CI example, come up with an alternative. There are several different alternatives, and I'll go through those. But use alternatives. And finally, stop IAM users from being created in the first place using SCPs. The SPCs are service control policies. So you can actually even prevent administrators from creating IAM users. So they're the 5 steps. So let's go through the steps one at a time. So the first step is measure and monitor. So AWS has a free service. Some of the services are free. And this is a free service. So within IAM, you can go to Credential Report and you can download Credentials Report. So here's the Credential Report. So I'm just going to look at that here and open with Excel. Make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so here's my credential report. So you can see that we've got several users. We've got ARN is an Amazon resource number. We've got the date that they're created, whether there's a password, the last used time, whether there's an access key, and the last time the access key is used. So that's really good information. So for example, some of them have been used, well, I mean, like the one of the top, the root one I haven't used for a while. The Celidor admin one is what I've just logged into, so that's very recent. But this guard duty example, compromised user, hasn't been used since 2019. So I could do that. And that's free because it's just comes with AWS. So that's very straightforward. That's okay. And it's a good start. But in any any enterprise is going to have tens, hundreds, or maybe even thousands of AWS accounts. And you don't really want to go around every account and do this. So you could script it to go around every account and do it. And that would be an option. Or you could use tools like one of these. So we have Palo Alto Prisma people here. And I have learned today from Steve that the new Project Darwin has an inventory feature where you could just search for IAM users across the whole organization and search for the ones that haven't been used for a certain period of time, as an example. So you could very nicely just get all that information from a query. You can do something similar with Wiz and Cloud Query and other tools as well. All of these tools will hook into your clouds and can also be used to get reports from multiple different types of cloud as well, not just AWS. So several different ways you can measure and monitor, but the important thing is to find a way of doing it and to not just do it once, but have it scheduled to report on a regular basis. So that is measuring and monitoring. The next step is removing the inactive users. So you already saw there was that guard duty example, compromised one. We could just have a quick look at that in the console by going back to users. Here we are, last activity 1,599 days ago. We could just delete that, and that's one less IAM user. We get it down from 4 to 3. So we're making good progress. We've done step 1. We've gone backwards, and now we're on to step 3. So we've done step 1, which was measure and monitor. Done step 2, remove inactive users. Now things get a little bit more complicated, but in a good way. So step 3 is to use AWS IAM Identity Center, also known as single sign-on. So anybody here work for an organization that has implemented this? So we've got several, quite a few. Good, that's great. Nice to hear. So how does it actually work? So AWS AWS is really trying to encourage people to move to this, which is a really good thing. And they've integrated, so now if you try and create an IAM user, they say, don't create an IAM user, create one of these IAM Identity Center things. So what is an IAM Identity Center thing? Right, so what it is a user logs on to an identity provider. Now, usually that will be the identity provider that organization uses. So it could be if the organization uses Azure AD, which has now changed its name, we'll come on to that, then it might be Azure AD, or it might be Okta, or it could be an identity provider, it could be Google Workspace or something. Anyway, log into that via SAML. So SAML is Security Assertion Markup Language, standard, and receives back a SAML token after they've authenticated. And then that SAML token is exchanged for a STS, which is AWS Security Token Service token. And that token is then used to access the relevant account. So that's Identity Center. So let's have a look at what that is actually like in real life, because this is a bit conceptual. So let's have a look. So if I go into, that's still working. Yeah, good. Right. So IAM Identity Center is closely integrated with AWS organizations. So AWS organizations is a great service. It started off as the consolidated billing for companies who had hundreds of AWS accounts and just wanted a single bill. Then that was fairly quickly expanded to include lots of features for centralized management across all of those AWS accounts. So here's my AWS organization. So if I look at this, I've got a total of 5 AWS accounts in that organization, and one of them is the management account, which is what I'm logged into right now. So I've got a few AWS accounts in my org. That's good. So now I'll go to IAM Identity Center, which of course is spelled the American way. Not that I've got anything against that. And IAM Identity Center is a regional service. So yeah, I think the mic's battery's running out, is it?
That's right.
Yeah, I thought it was. And I've actually set this up in Ireland. 1, 2. We're just going to swap the mics.
Oh.
And turn this one off.
I don't know how that works. Apologies for those online staring at my backside.
Hi there. Yeah, hopefully. Right. Okay, IAM Identity Center. So I've set this up and I've actually linked it to an identity source, which is Azure AD, I'm going to call it. So that's all set up. And we then set up certain permission sets. So permission sets are collections of permissions that you're going to give to different groups. So I've created a few of those: security audit, view only access, admin access. So there's some of the permission sets. And then I can say, well, I've got an AWS account here, and I've maybe got this account, and I want to give this account. I want to let this group get access to this account with this permission set and this permission set. So you can be very flexible. It's a really good service. And everything's tied to your central identity, which is fantastic. So you've seen what it's like from the AWS point of view. Now let's have a look at the yeah, oops, not those. I've got to keep track of all these different browsers I've got. That's the one I wanted, Firefox. So who knows, and this is not a trick question, this is me actually wanting to know the answer. Who knows how to pronounce the new version of Azure AD? No, I really don't know. Is it Entra or Entra ID? It's called Entra ID, is it? Okay, thank you. I'm really.
It's an invitation to enter.
Okay. So it's Entra ID. Okay. I wasn't sure. So I'll go into Entra ID. It's the first time I've said it with that pronunciation, but thank you. So Entra ID. So here we've got a whole load of users. Here are my users. Okay, we've got some groups, various groups. And I want to give some of those individuals access to my AWS org using AWS IAM Identity Center. That's what I want to do. So how do I do that? Well, I do the setup in AWS that I've just shown you, then go into enterprise applications, and I create an enterprise app in Azure, Entra AD, called AWS Single Sign-On, and set this up with SAML and the certificates and everything to work with AWS in the correct way. So that's all great. Then I also say these users in groups, I'm going to allow them to use the app. So I've given these, so you don't have to synchronize everybody with AWS Single Sign-On, Identity Center, just some groups you can choose. And then also, you need to set up provisioning. And provisioning I've set up using SCIM. So SCIM is the System for Cross-Domain Identity Management, which is a way of provisioning users into AWS. So I've provisioned 16 users into AWS. So if I look in AWS, I can actually see them in AWS as well. Here are my users in AWS. And if you haven't got a corporate identity source like 0D, you can just configure them directly here. But most organizations do already have something like Google Workspace or Directory or Entra ID. Okay, so that's all the setup. But what's it like from an end user perspective? Well, some of you use it yourself, clearly, which is great. For those of you who don't, here's one of the users, Hassan Wulandari. So I've already logged in with Hassan Wulandari's Microsoft account and gone to myapps.microsoft.com. And you can see here, there's this AWS SSO logo representing the app. So I'm going to select that. And then as Hassan Wulandari, one of the users, I have access to an AWS, or two AWS accounts. And this AWS account, I can choose the role that I want. So I'm going to choose the admin role for that. So that's AWS IAM Identity Center. So yeah, okay with that. So that's the recommendation for human users. So all human users should be moved to IAM Identity Center. And then you can get rid of their old IAM identities if they have any, well, which they will, almost certainly. So that's step 3. Right, so we're getting there. I know there's a lot of different things we're flicking through here. So, right, so step 4. So we've sorted out the human beings. We now need to sort out the machines. So there's several different options here. First option is to assume an IAM role from an AWS principal. Second option is resource space policies. I'll go through these in more detail and demo them, or most of them. OpenID Connect is another one, and IAM roles anywhere is another one. So we're going to go through each of these in turn. So that's what we'll do next. So let's suppose you have a new supplier. So let's suppose, well, I'm going to say Palo Alto Prisma, but it's probably not even an option anymore. But in the old days, if you had a system like Prisma, you could actually create an IAM user. I don't know if that's even an option, but anyway, you used to be able to actually, I think, yeah, you could create an IAM user and then open up the Prisma Cloud console and then actually put in the access key into Prisma Cloud. I'd imagine you probably got rid of that by now, but or maybe it's a legacy option. But anyway, that's the old way of doing things. The new way of doing things, which is much more secure, is that your new supplier, which in taking this example would be Palo Alto Prisma, will have their own AWS account themselves, and you will then allow that AWS account to assume a role into your AWS organization with temporary credentials that just last a short period of time, maybe an hour or maybe 8 hours, to then access resources. So the first one is bad because you've got these long-lived keys that never expire and have to be rotated and can get lost and stolen and all sorts. The second option is good. So that's the first thing. So move where you've got a third party, provided they've got this as an option, and most providers do now have it as an option, move to that option, get rid of the first option. And this works provided that third party supports it, and also provided they have an AWS account that they've set up in this way. So what would that actually look like? Well, if I go into Hassan Wulandari's admin account, then I could go into IAM here, and I can go into roles, and within roles, got a role here called server role v1, and that has certain permissions associated with it. In this case, EC2 and Route 53, and more importantly, there's a trust relationship. So this trust relationship says that we're going to allow this other AWS account to assume into this role. Now, those AWS experts amongst you, from a security point of view, what's missing from this? It's all right, it doesn't matter. So what you should actually use is what's called an external ID to make this more secure. But anyway, you get the principle. An external ID is like a string, and you'll put it in as a condition. And I didn't do that, so that's like a fail. But anyway, but nevertheless, this is the trust relationship. So that's what it looks like when you're setting up the trust relationships. It's not hard to do. So what is it like to use it? So normally this would be used by a machine, but you can also do this as a human being as well. So if I go to this account, I could just select, I've done this before, so I could just select that role, which is assuming into the role we've just seen. So you can see here, this is now turned pink in the corner. So that means I've assumed a role into another account. I haven't got permissions to do this particular thing, but I could go to, for example, EC2, where I probably will have permissions. And yeah, so I can do quite a lot in EC2 with the permissions that I've got. So I've now assumed a role into that other AWS account, and now I can also just switch back to where it was in the first place. So that's a human being doing it, but it's the absolute equivalent when it's a programmatic. So that's the first thing that you can do. First is first alternative for machine access rather than using IAM users. Okay, so the next option is resource-based policies. So here, what we're doing is we're saying within a resource policy, we're just going to allow a particular AWS account to connect. So here's an example with an S3 bucket policy. We're saying account B's ID is allowed to connect into the bucket. Now that's very straightforward to implement because you don't have to assume a role. However, it is only supported by some AWS services. And the ones that I picked up, there are others, but they include S3, Elastic Container Registry. This is like a test for myself. So give me a while ago, I thought, what are all of these? EFS, Elastic File Service, API Gateway, KMS, Key Management Service, Simple Notification Service, or SNS, Simple Queue Service, SQS, and Elasticsearch. OpenSearch, I think they call it now. Right, so that's all fine. So it's supported by some services, but not all that many. It is harder to audit than IAM roles because these policies are all over the place with the resource. They're not central anymore under IAM, so they're a bit harder to figure out who has access to what. But you do have IAM Access Analyzer, which can help with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, if whoever set it up the principle wrongly, or just leave it as asterisks or whatever, to whoever can assume it, it's gonna be there's gonna be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, but I think the way that it works is, and this is one of the things that's a bit of a hassle about doing it. That when you create the permissions, create the policy, AWS will only allow you to create the policy if that principle exists. So that's sort of good and bad because it means that there's a certain order you have to do things in. But on the positive side, it has to exist, so that helps a bit, I think. So, all right, so the next one is OpenID Connect, which actually demoed the last time I was here, but that's a relatively recent, well, it's been around quite a long time actually, but just the last year or so, it's become a lot more prominent. And it's very commonly used. A good example of how it's used is for CI/CD systems like Circle CI or GitHub to deploy to the cloud. So taking that example, GitHub Actions can be used with a GitHub Actions provider to send a token to AWS, get temporary AWS credentials, and then use those to assume the target role. and then will receive certain permissions and be able to do certain things in AWS. So that's conceptually the concept. So what does that one look like? Well, if we go to I'm trying to keep track of all these different AWS, all these different browsers. Which browser am I in? Which account am I in? Because there are all these different accounts. Right. Yeah, I think this is the right one. Right. So OIDC. Oh no, this is the wrong one. Right. This is
the user.
no, it's another one. This is Safari now. Gone to Safari. Right. This is what I wanted to show you. Okay. Right. So we're going to go to IAM. Again, don't take a lot of IAM today, but then that was the topic of the talk. So we're going to go to roles and we are going to search for OIDC. So we have a role here to deploy Domain Protect, which is the OWASP project, which Sam encouraged me to turn into an OWASP project. So anyway, we have a deploy policy, and that's assigned to a role. And then we have a trust relationship, and the trust relationship allows the use of GitHub Actions, which is great. And the really important thing here is these condition statements. So when AWS first brought this service out, they adding the condition statement was unfortunately optional. And in fact, the documentation said, trace it first and then go back in and put the condition in, which meant that some people forgot to do it. And if you forgot to do it, then that would mean that any repository can actually deploy to your
Full access.
Potentially full access, because these CI/CD access permissions normally will be pretty privileged. So, but if it's set up correctly, then you specify the org, the GitHub org, the repo, and the branch or the environment. So that's good. And since there were several examples of this that were highlighted, AWS did some great work so that now if you do this, they actually force you to, with GitHub anyway, GitHub Actions, they force you to put in a repository, which is good. So anyway, so that's the trust statement. So what does that actually look like? Well, if I go to this repo, which is the one that has that trust relationship, I can go into GitHub Actions and I can just choose the workflow and run the workflow. So that will then.
But where is it authenticated? Show the authentication.
Well, I could show you, but I could show you the logs, but
not the logs, but the.
So what? Go on. I mean, it's assuming a role. It's assuming that role, and then by virtue of it, the trust relationship between GitHub and AWS, and the factors coming from this GitHub org and GitHub repository, it meets the condition that it's allowed to assume that role. So that is the authentication. Well, I mean, technically, it's actually going to be, as in that slide, it'll be a JWT, JSON Web Token, going from GitHub to AWS, and then AWS returning an STS token to GitHub, and then GitHub Actions using it on behalf of this workflow.
But you don't need to do anything on GitHub Actions side to configure this. It's only on.
Oh no, you do. Yeah, you do. So
yeah,
okay, right. So if I go into code, this is all public repo because it's OWASP, so all open source. Yeah, you can go into here, go into .github, and within .github, we go into workflows and deploy.yaml. Because it's a public repo, I didn't really want to put like the details of my role in there. So in this particular case, the role to assume I've actually set up as a GitHub secret, but that's not a credential. That's just the name of the role because, well, the ARN, Amazon Resource Number of the role, because I didn't want to make it public to the whole world. You know, so if I went into here.
But it was the role to assume. That's what.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's how you configure it.
Yeah, exactly. And then yeah, so if I went to secrets, you can't actually see it. You can see where it is. Then this is the deploy role. So that's the secret. But well, it's not a secret really. So if it was if it was an internal repo within my enterprise, I wouldn't bother doing this, to be honest. But because it's a public repo, I thought it would be a good idea. Okay, so that's OpenID Connect. So one thing to note is, although nearly all the examples you'll see are for GitHub Actions, that's the common example. Can be used for Circle CI, but it can also be used if, say, you wanted to authenticate from GCP to AWS or Azure or Azure to AWS. You could use it for that as well. So that's all possible to do. So you can figure that yourself. So thank you for your patience. We're getting there. We're working our way through this. What's next? So next is AWS IAM roles anywhere. Okay, so has anybody tried using this? This is a relatively new service. So, okay, so IAM roles anywhere. This is certificate based. So you have a certificate, user certificate is issued by a private certificate authority. So that can be the AWS private CA, which is very expensive, or it can be your own private CA. And that user certificate is used to authenticate to IAM roles anywhere, which then checks whether it's been issued by the right certificate authority using a trust anchor, which is just their name for a chain of a certificate authority and root CA and then the intermediate CAs. So this was launched in July 2022. And in July this year, they added support for operating system key stores in September, so last month. Yeah, I was thinking, what month are we? Just October, just. Yeah, they supported PKCS11 and YubiKeys. Oh, well, that's what it says under there. Let me press the hide button. I wasn't sure if that was coming up on the screen. Right. Yes. Okay. Hopefully I didn't disconnect the stream. I just hit it, I think. No, all good. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's a fairly recent service. So I wrote up a my first Medium article on this. AWS IAM roles anywhere with macOS keychain, and there's also a GitHub repo associated with that. Solidor AWS IAM roles anywhere. And again, all the links are in the copy of the presentation. So let's have a look at some of that. All right. So back to here. So if I go back into roles and then go down to the bottom, and you can see we've got roles anywhere, which is this new service. So I'm going to select manage. Now, roles anywhere is a regional service, not a global service. And I've set this up in London. So I'm going to go into London. And set this up with a test certificate authority. And the code, I set this up with using Python. And the code for users for doing all of that is in that repo, which I just mentioned, and linked into the links to it from that Medium article. I should just say that this is not meant to be code for a production certificate authority because the keys are not stored securely. So don't use this for production CA, but as a demo, it's absolutely fine to use as a demo. So we've got this certificate authority that's used here. And then we're saying that if you have a client certificate issued by this CA, then you can get certain permissions and do certain things. So in this case, set it up to allow you to just read access from a single S3 bucket. So that's how that's all set up. And then I've set up a key and certificate pair issued by that CA in my Mac OS keychain. So you can see here, we've got the certificate and we've got the key. So if I double click on the certificate, and that's a bit small, but you can see that there's lots of certificate-y stuff and the key. So that's all there. So now let's see if it all works. So I'm going to get my repo where I've set this up and copy this and make this a little bit bigger. paste in the commands. So now I'll use the very useful command, AWS STS get -caller -identity. So this is a good command. Oops, if I can spell it right. If I spell it like that, it's not going to do anything, is it? Whoops, get caller identity. So here we are. So you can see that we have actually assumed the I am roles anywhere role. That's the correct role. So I've assumed it. This isn't some other stored credentials. We've assumed the role. And now if I type AWS S3LS to list all buckets, so that's failed because I don't have permissions to do that. But I should have permissions to do this, which is to download a file from just one particular bucket. So this file is called confidential.png. So I'll do that. So here it is. It's just arrived. So there it is. So that's AWS IAM roles anywhere.
You do not have to log in, provide username or password or access to it.
Yeah. So yes. So you have just seen what I believe, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is the world's first demo of this with macOS Keychain in public anyway, because I don't think anybody else has done it before or is nerdy enough to be interested to set this all up. But if you were, you could read that Medium article and follow all the steps in there. So that is IAM roles anywhere. But what I do want to say, and I did put a few notes to this effect at the end of the article, is just because it uses certificates and it's a fancy new service, it doesn't actually mean it's any more secure. So this isn't necessarily any more secure than access keys and keys, because somebody could steal the certificate and private key. So, it's not a panacea, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong with implementing a certificate authority, or PKI, public key infrastructure, as it's known. So it's best to use it for those organizations that already have a enterprise PKI or certificate authority and who are storing private keys securely in hardware, for example, on YubiKeys, in TPMs, trusted platform modules, or similar. So do be wary of, don't just use it because it has the word certificate in it. But it is an alternative to access keys and an alternative to IAM users. So you're all still here. You've made it with me so far, so I'm very impressed with that. We're nearly finished. So step 5 is the simplest one. Well, maybe the first one was simplest, but this is very straightforward. So now that you've come up with all these methods of getting rid of all the IAM users, stop people making any more. And of course, these 5 steps don't have to be done like linearly. We can overlap them. So step 5 is preventing using a service control policy. So let's just have a look at that. And this will be the last demo. So if we go back into my org, so if we go into organizations again, so service control policies are a feature of AWS organizations. So I can go into policies, and one of the types of policies is service control policies. And I've got a policy here, which is prevent IAM user creation, which just simply says deny IAM create user, and I've assigned it to this AWS account. So that's also the AWS account which I logged into as Hassan Ulandari. So if I go in here, so bearing in mind Hassan is an admin, so this is an admin here. So Hassan is going into IAM, going to create an IAM user, and we're going to call the IAM user Sam because I'm thinking about Sam because he's Sam. There he is. So we'll just do next and next and create Sam as user. And I couldn't create Sam's user, denied with the service control policy. So that's the SCP. Okay. So just to recap, 5 steps to IAM 0. So measure and monitor was the first. Second one was remove inactive users. Third one, move human users to IAM Identity Center. Fourth one is come up with the right alternative for all your machine-based use cases. And finally, prevent using service control policies. So that's it. Road to Arm Zero, we got there. Thank you. Yeah, and feel free to get in touch. And if you want to communicate with me, probably the best way out of these is the Cloud Security Forum Slack, also on OWASP Slack as well. But if you want to join the Cloud Security Forum Slack, which is really interesting Slack workspace, just come and see me. I think I invited you, didn't I? Steve, I think.
I'm on it.
Yes, or Steve, and we can get you invited. And then you can just message us directly and also learn lots about cloud security from all the wonderful people who are part of that community.
Any further questions from the audience? Okay, all right. That
means I've just blinded you all with too much.
means-
Or you just want to get a beer, that's fine.
I have a comment which might make a bit sense.
All right.
Yeah.
What is it?
So the comment is, if you don't know, there was a very big breach happening because of IAM user situation. I think it was Citrix or Zoom, one of these big companies. They said this disgruntled user got sacked. He got home because he still had IAM user to log into the AWS account. And what's the problem with the cloud? Everything's virtual. And if you have a physical data center with physical walls made out of brick and physical servers in the racks, it's very difficult to destroy them. You have to ram the data center with bulldozer. But this guy, he just logged in with his account, logged into AWS, selected everything, every cloud resource, every virtual server running in EC2, click delete. In 1 minute, the entire cloud infrastructure was gone. So it's not necessarily things like cryptocurrency miners, because they generate money, of course, and people prefer to do that. But it can be much, much worse because your entire cloud can be gone within 1 minute. So don't leave IAM users.
All right, ending on selling fear. Thanks, Sam. All right, that's fantastic. We typically go for drinks afterwards at a pub called The Gun. If you want to do that, we follow David over in the back corner, there he is right there, Pied Piper right there, leading us all to our demise. Otherwise, our next event, once again, is November 15th. Thank you, Sam, part of the Shadow organization.
Yep.
And Veracode at Veracode. And also, if you haven't already scanned the QR code at the back, please go do so. You have an opportunity to win something incredibly valuable at an amazing conference that hopefully we'll see you at. Otherwise, any other further announcements?
The
Jess?
excellent Medium article and repo have been posted on all of our socials, so go check them out. Really cool. Thank you.
Great.
All right, thanks for waiting another round for Paul. Cheers, socialize, and go to the pub.
Gosh. Thanks, that's a really good example, that one.